Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, this chat today is going to be on staff buy-in for PBIS. This is always a very popular topic because without staff buy-in, it can be really hard to have fidelity with our PBIS framework. And presenting today is Dama Absher from our project and also some representatives from Volusia County Schools. So you're going to get a real world example of how folks are making their way through this and establishing buy-in and hopefully gather some information that's helpful for you. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to let Dama introduce everybody, and I'll continue to admit people.
Thank you, Betsy. And thanks for the introduction. I'm Dama Absher, and I'm with Florida's PBIS project, and I have the pleasure of supporting Gilchrist County, Levy County, Marion, and Volusia. And today we have an exemplary, what I refer to as dream team from Volusia County, and dream team being from the district down. So Dr. Mandy Elzy is Behavioral Initiative Specialist, and she has been coordinating and communicating and kind of serving as that liaison between Volusia County schools and the PBIS project for a very long time. I want to say like almost 2 decades.
Don't make me feel old.
I was thinking, what's the correct way to say that she has a lot of experience? She
I'm
has not
seasoned.
aged.
I'm seasoned well.
That's right. She is seasoned well. She hasn't aged, but she has years and years of experience there in I'm going to say Marion, Volusia County, doing this work and leading this work, and really going from maybe 20% of schools implementing PBIS to district-wide support for implementation of PBIS. And then also with us, and they will be in and out, but with us throughout the hour, is this dream team from Timbercrest Elementary School, starting with Mr. Lonnie Tidmarsh at the top as principal. And they may want to speak more to this, but I believe he is also Principal of the Year in Volusia County, and that is a very well-deserved acknowledgement. Miss Michelle Miles, Assistant Principal Extraordinaire, and she is physically on your screen with us today at the moment, and also Miss Riley Bryant, Teacher on Assignment. So if I understand everyone's location correctly, Mr. Tidmarsh is on another campus, I believe, possibly mentoring another school administrator.
Right.
Right. And then Miss Michelle Miles is on campus holding down the fort, which all of you who are school-based leaders know, when your admin team is off campus and you are holding down the fort, that means you're the only one there doing all the things. And she's also with us presenting. So I am very, very impressed at that willingness to do so, and that she's here with us and smiling. And then Miss Riley Bryant is off campus in a training, but she will be stepping out of her training to hop on. And they really are an exemplary school leadership team, and they are our exemplar presenters this morning, along with Dr. Elzy, to just talk about staff buy-in as a real world example. And so I'm going to start us off, just kind of go through some of the objectives for our technical assistance chat this morning, and a little bit of orientation around the topic of faculty commitment and staff buy-in, get all of us kind of on that same page and get you all thinking about this topic if you didn't already come in with questions. So we're going to review faculty commitment, staff buy-in, what it means, what it looks like, how we measure it, how we know if we have it or don't. And then PBS district and school leaders are going to share their intentional practices for building staff commitment and buy-in. And so as you hear from them at the district and school level, you're going to see a lot of very practical, real-world examples of the things they're doing and the ways they're incredibly intentional about everything they do, and how their work does make it or break it when it comes to how much other folks are bought into the idea and the mission and vision of what we're trying to do with PBIS implementation. And then you all as participants will be offered the opportunity to ask questions and engage in dialogue. If our group isn't too big, we can unmute and have some dialogue back and forth with our guest presenters and featured presenters. And if not, then we'll use the chat box. So I'll go ahead and say it now, and I'll probably remind you throughout. If you think of a question that you really hope is answered today, feel free to put that in the chat. We'll keep an eye on it. And so even if it's not the appropriate time to bring it up as you put that in the chat, we will, keep an eye on those questions and comments and bring them up at some point when we get into the questions and answers. And so to really get us all thinking about this topic, I'd like for you to take a moment, think about your own words, your own thoughts and ideas, and describe what faculty commitment and staff buy-in really kind of means to you. What does it look like? How do you improve it? Maybe what are some of the, even some of the things you've personally experienced of what it looks like or doesn't look like, or how you've worked to improve it or hope to improve it. And how do you measure it? Like, how do you know you have buy-in? And again, this is really just what thoughts come to mind for you in your own words. Doesn't have to be, a perfect research-based textbook answer, but just what does it mean to you? Oh, I was going to attempt to look at the chat and I might have just messed up my screen. So hopefully we've got some folks maybe typing in the chat. All adults going in the same direction to support school culture and student success. Great. So that's kind of what it looks like. Anybody else want to add in the chat a little description of faculty commitment, staff buy-in? I'll give you a moment. I know we jumped right into a request for you to enter something into the chat box, so you might still be thinking. Commitment to a shared vision and common understanding of the work. Very good. And I love that description of shared vision and common understanding. So, I mean, it's easy to say that, as you are probably familiar with, but how do you do it? Like, how do you get folks to have that shared vision and common understanding? Staff supporting PBS initiatives and receiving the same staff incentives. I love that. Staff incentives are a really great way to help us get on the same page and remember why we're doing what we're doing. It's fun to be acknowledged for our work. All adults committed to shared vision and mission through participation, supporting the work being done by actively using it with students. Anything else? Some of the things that I think you're going to be really excited to hear from the team today, as I'm looking at your descriptions, and I think that there are so many examples of that in what we'll hear from Timbercrest today. So I'm glad that these are the ways you're describing faculty commitment and buy-in. At Oak Park, we use Microsoft Form to record workers' recognition of coworkers' PBIS initiatives. That is cool. I'm sure others are going to want to potentially hear more about that. And if you hear something in the chat that you're interested in knowing more about, of course, you can chat with each other, but you are welcome to also, when we get to the dialogue at the end, share some of the things that you've seen work in successful practices, because I know the real value is hearing and learning from one another. Improving it and measuring it, led by leadership, devotion by team to encourage colleagues, measured by adult fidelity of implementation, student social and emotional growth, and culture surveys. Awesome. You guys are super engaged this morning. I appreciate that. Feel free to continue putting things there in the chat. I will, if anybody sees something that you think, okay, we need to pause Dama and read this out loud, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on going and share a little bit about the question of how do you measure it? So to remind us about the benchmarks of quality, I don't want to assume that everyone is familiar. I know we all are at varying levels of experience. So some of you may be brand new team members, you may be brand new to your job in coordinating at the district level. And so you may not have a lot of familiarity with some of the ways that we measure our fidelity of implementation. So the benchmarks of quality is our self-report or self-assessment that the team completes annually on their fidelity of implementation of PBIS. So school-wide PBIS implementation, how well we are working towards getting all of those critical elements in place. And it's a great way to action plan. So when we see areas that we have some, need for growth or improvement, some opportunities for growth, we have some actionable steps. So if this is maybe your first year with implementation, you likely did the benchmarks of quality during your training. If you've been implementing for more than a year, this is something that you would have done at the end of the year, part of the end of year evaluation and reflection and action planning. And so these 3 bulleted items are from the benchmarks of quality, and they are the questions or the statements related to faculty commitment. So thinking about how we measure faculty commitment, those look like faculty are aware of behavior problems across campus through regular data sharing, faculty involved in establishing and reviewing goals, faculty feedback is obtained throughout the year. And I heard a lot of really good examples of that when you all were sharing what staff buy-in looks like and how you measure it. And so that's how we measure on the benchmarks of quality, the fidelity of the faculty commitment piece with implementation. And so the snippet there, screenshot, is just a picture. If you haven't or you're not familiar with that benchmarks of quality, there's a technical guide that kind of talks you through some of the glossary definitions, how to use it, and the rubric for completing that. And that is a really useful document, or assessment for really action planning your implementation. And so I'm going to turn it over to our team, and Dr. Elsie will get us started. This is a picture of them being acknowledged at the school board meeting for their model school status at Timbercrest. And again, well-deserved recognition. They work really hard at implementation, but I have to tell you, they make it look really easy. I know they work really hard, but I am not kidding you. Anytime I see a social media post, I talk with them, interact, any kind of opportunity I have to talk about this team or talk with this team, I literally leave that conversation wanting to work at Timbercrest Elementary School. And so I hope that you see their enthusiasm and their hard work and how they really make it look effortless. But we're going to start off by hearing from Dr. Elsie and some of what she sees as an outsider looking in and as a district supporter looking in at their work.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I always struggle with the initial unmuting process here, but I am unmuted. Hopefully you can all hear me well. I am Dr. Mandy Elsie, and I have been in my position for 20 years. Thank you, Dr. Abshir, for opening up that bit of disclosure. I have had the pleasure of working with the Florida PBIS project since 2011. So initially we were doing another approach to school-wide discipline and behavior, but we established this collaboration in 2011. It has been extremely helpful for me. So first, let me say that working with Timbercrest Elementary and Mr. Tidmarsh has been one of the easiest things that I've had to do because of the things that we're going to share with you today. So I want to share my perspective from the outsider looking in because it has been so easy to do this. So I will go back, I think they're 5th or 6th years, 2015, 16, when we initially had the conversation with a previous principal about the changing in their demographics and some of the changes in behavior that they were seeing in at Timbercrest Elementary. And he felt like it was a good time for them to revisit and become a PBIS school. At that point in time, Mr. Tidmarsh was his assistant principal. So he was in from the ground up in a very he was on top of it. It was really given this as a project as the AP, and he took it and has run with it ever since. So from day one, and with this initial principal, his retirement, another principal came to be. Mr. Tidmarsh went to another school for a year and then came back as the principal. So there's been administrative changes at Timbercrest Elementary throughout my work with them. However, the number one thing that I have always appreciated and admired from Timbercrest and their administration is that all administrators have consistently shown enthusiasm for PBIS. And in addition to showing that enthusiasm from that initial principal, the changes, and then where they currently are with Miss Miles and Miss Bryant under the leadership of Mr. Tidmarsh, is that I can go to any one of those administrators as well as the academic coach. I can go anywhere on that campus and know that Mr. Tidmarsh has empowered not only his staff, but his leadership team. So when we were planning this, and it was, well, Mr. Tidmarsh isn't going to be there. And I'm like, no problem. Miss Miles has got it, or Miss Bryant's got it, because they go hand in hand. In fact, I can say that a previous TOA that was working under Mr. Tidmarsh, he kind of handed this to her to lead the way when he became principal. She's now assistant principal at another school, and she knew how to do it so well from that collaboration and from his leadership that she was able to take it to the other schools. So it just really expands that opportunity for collaboration, and then leading that into some of our other Volusia County schools as that support. The other thing that I have been able to observe throughout the years is that everything that they have done has been very intentional and very systematic. So, for example, before they moved into anything else, and this is how it should be, they had a solid tier 1 as their foundation. And Ms. Miles will talk about some of the adjustments they may have made in their tier 1 approach, but they always made sure that they had it the way that it should be running and the way that they felt it was most beneficial to Timbercrest community. And I'm going to say community because parents are involved. The Schoolway Cafe, transportation, students, they have all been embraced into that PBIS approach, and it has become just part of their culture, as it should be. Also throughout, they have always been able to identify what they want to do, but then also being very cognizant of making sure that is what the next steps that they take are. Let's get that in place before we go forward. So it's always very planned. Every phase that they have done, they have gone through the tier 2 training. They're doing a beautiful job with their tier 2 implementation. And that was probably 3 to 4 years ago when they went through that training. They have ingrained it into the Tiger culture. So when they, and Ms. Miles can speak more to this, when they went to implement what their PBIS would look like in the cafeteria, they had conversations with the Schoolway Cafe supervisor to say, this is what we'd like to do. How is it going to work in here? So every voice along the way has been heard and has contributed to the problem solving and fine tuning of what they have done as that Tiger culture. I can also share with you that because they look at things systematically, so fine-tuned as they do, I at one point was invited in to talk about a social emotional learning approach back when we were doing more of that. And they loved what I had to offer. However, they didn't feel like Timbercrest was ready to jump into that at that point. So they said, this is something we want to do in the future, but we're not quite there yet. So I totally respected that and really enjoyed seeing how they kept things moving forward. And finally, Timbercrest has found a way to keep PBIS expectations and their approaches and their positivity alive, even during COVID. So as an example, I can say that we went through the lockdown, we put PBIS into our online instruction. However, when we came back from the lockdown, but there were still kids that were online learning, I was able to go observe how the parents were able to drive those kids participating in online through parent pickup in the afternoon, and they were giving out, the administration was giving out and celebrating these students for living those PBI expectations through their online learning and with their family. So it's always just, I think my main point is it's always been very, very deliberate in everything that they've done. So Dana, if you want to go ahead and change, there we go. So just some snippets that we pulled out, and knowing that with Timbercrest, Mr. Tidmarsh, I would say, is probably our A1A person in Volusia County Schools for using social media. And he is all over what used to be called Twitter is now X. And these were just some of the ways that they put even some of the things that we may think that are small things, they celebrate them and they put them out so the families can be involved. I can be involved, even though I wasn't at the celebration. But, Tiger Strike Thursday, thank you to the amazing staff. Somebody asked about, how do we acknowledge staff who believe in those positive expectations, and that Tigers are consistently showing that safety, respect, and responsibility. They had a time when they celebrated Mrs. Keith and her class for following those PBIS expectations every single day. And thirdly, those celebrating PBIS expectations being met by Team Harriman. I probably butchered that, but with the popcorn party. So they're going to talk a little bit about how they've used the house system as their reinforcement system, but they also went through some dissecting of how that house system would look to become their school-wide incentive program. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Miles and perhaps Ms. Bryant to talk from the voices of the Tiger team and what it looked like for them. So Ms. Miles, I'm going to mute and turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. So I do have both Ms. Bryant and Mr. Tidmarsh have now joined, so they are on as well. And I thought I'd let Ms. Bryant talk about that previous slide about our social media presence and our celebrations, since she is one of our major players in putting all of that together. Ms. Bryant? And Ms. Bryant is joining us, as mentioned earlier, from a training. The place she's at is very spotty Wi-Fi, and she is walking around that campus with this on her phone. And so hopefully she'll be able to communicate. If not, we'll pop in. Let's give her a second.
I feel like it's like that awkward transition on the news when we're like,
Yes.
giving updates on a hurricane.
Hello? A delay. Well, I'll go ahead and start talking, and then if she is able to join, then she can speak in as well. So what you see here are some of our Twitter slides, as well as our posts, and we also post on Facebook. And what we do, we call it our Tiger Strike. And I'm sorry, that was my radio. And so what we do is the teachers earn tickets for themselves modeling our PBIS expectations. And those are be safe, be responsible, and be respectful. And when the teacher implements those in the classroom, when she submits house points, which we'll talk about the house system in a minute, if she gives positive referrals to, Miss Bryant's saying we can't hear, she can't hear me. So the teachers earn tickets, and then every Friday we do a Tiger Strike. And what that is we will pull a ticket, and we've changed it up a little bit this year. This year, what we're doing is we will pull 4 tickets on a Friday, and then our admin team, we will each go to one of those classrooms and we will give them coverage for 10 minutes. And then the students will get a snack. If it's the end of the month, the teacher gets 30 minutes coverage and her students get snacks. And so it's just a way for us to show our appreciation for the teachers to be implementing our expectations in the classroom as well. And so we never know where we're going to be going. They don't know where we're going to be going, but we always videotape an entry sequence while we pull the names. And then if we are doing the regular Fridays, we each take selfies with the teacher in the class, or if it's the end of the month, then we parade in with music and throwing candy and stuff like that. And then this teacher coordinates to give us times when we can come in and do that 30-minute coverage, just to give them a break and show our appreciation for all of that, their participation. Moving forward to the next slide, let me see if Miss Bryant can hear us, but we just can't hear her for some reason. So I'll just keep going. On this slide, you'll see where we are intentional on the integration of the house system. And we've had other participants in other trainings that we've been to who have mentioned about putting in a house system as well as their PBIS expectations and doing them all together. And what we did here is we started with the PBIS system first. We got our expectations set. We met with staff, decided on what we wanted those to be. And that's where we came up with the be safe, be responsible, and be respectful. And then we integrated the house system. And that came about because some teachers who had been at other schools had gone up to see Ron Clark. And then my first year here as the assistant principal, a group of us went up to Ron Clark. And then the next year, when Mr. Tidmarsh came back on board as our principal, another group went to Ron Clark. And so all of the teachers who had been to Ron Clark, we had a meeting and we came together. We discussed how we could integrate our PBIS expectations into a house system. And so we then set up the 4 houses. They're all named after tigers. And then we sorted the entire school at the beginning. We did this at the end of a school year. So the beginning of the next school year, all the teachers were sorted during pre-planning. And then the second week of school, we had every student on campus sorted. And this has been at least 5 years now that we have been doing the house system integrated. And now every year when we have new students come on board, they are sorted into a house as well. And so the teachers then have tracking charts in their classrooms. And when the students are doing something well or going above and beyond, they can earn house points. And so they just put tally marks. And at the end of each week, they turn those into Mrs. Bryant. And she keeps a running spreadsheet and then announces who the house point lead is for that week. Then at the end of the midterm and the end of the quarter, we do a house party for whichever team is in the lead. And that's one of the pictures that you saw in the slide there. We do dancing. We might do, we did a glow in the dark party, sidewalk chalk party. And then the students of that house, they get a treat as well, drinks and some kind of a snack. And then the teachers who are in that house may also attend if they can get coverage for their classrooms as well. Including all stakeholders in the system, cafe, transportation. So what we've done is we have those tally mark charts I was talking about. We also have those set up in the cafeteria. We also have them on the bus. And we also have what we call a matrix. And so we have set up what it looks like to be safe, to be responsible, to be respectful in each area of our entire campus. And so we've got huge posters posted in the cafeteria. We have smaller posters for the bus as well. Miss Bryant and I each got on the buses and talked with the students and the bus drivers about what bus expectations should look like. And then the bus drivers have the students earn house points as well. And those transfer over for our houses altogether, but also the students on the bus could earn a popsicle party when each time that they earn 25 points. And so that's trying to get everyone involved as well. I'm not sure if Mr. Tidmarsh, if you'd like to jump in and share anything at this point.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, morning, whatever time it is. Thank you, Mandy and Doctor, for just your continued support. And Michelle really just nailed all the details and some of the key things. Looking at it from a more global perspective, I'm actually at another school today, working with them as far as PBIS is concerned. And, one of the 3 of the big key components that we looked at from day one, I'm going to share, which Michelle, again, reiterated everything and gave a lot of details, but we know it's going to look different at every school based on economics, demographics, so on and so forth. But these three things are key in order to get it off running effectively, in my opinion. And they're the three biggest things. First of all, data is key. When we were first showing and getting the buy-in from the staff, there was 100,000 excuses why we can't do PBIS, this. But ultimately, teachers, educators love data, especially when it's color-coded, right? Has the yellow and green and red. And so when we initially started, Timbercrest was a school that had between 600 and 700 referrals. And that's just way too much. And so look at it after 3 years of implementation, we are down to less than 100 referrals a year. And that's a school of 700 to 800 students. So my point to that is, when I'm talking with other schools and they're asking, how do you get that initial buy-in? It's the data. And I've given other schools our data and said, okay, this is where we were 2015, 2016, and this is where we are now. And I can 100% say that the biggest influence, hands down, is PBIS. If anything, our socioeconomic, the amount of students that we have on free and reduced lunch have gotten worse, have gotten higher. But we're making steadily progress because, again, getting more buy-in. So the one thing I would recommend is really getting that data together, collect it, maybe reach out to some other schools that have maybe the same demographics, same size, that have implemented PBIS, and see if you can get some of their data, because initially when we got this off the ground, the data was key, because once we shared it with our staff and our stakeholders, there was no excuses. All excuses are taken off the table. Second main point I would just emphasize is make sure that you're empowering, including all of your stakeholders. Ms. Miles talked a little bit about the specifics with the cafe, transportation, support staff. All of those are key players, but just as important, if not more important, is your parents and your families. Once you get their buy-in, once they understand what your PBIS expectations are, once they know how they can help support those expectations at home and the students' daily lives, it's going to make the biggest impact, because now you've got the consistency, and you have the consistency of what you're trying to do at school taking place at home. So, some of the ways that we've done that is through social media. And like Mandy had mentioned, there's things that we do that could be taken for granted. But let's be honest, when parents see their kids being recognized, when parents, grandparents see their child on social media being recognized, that is as important as any 5 on a state test. So my point to that is, we really utilize and leverage social media to promote PBIS and to recognize PBIS, because we know that at Timbercrest, it's only as strong as our entire Timbercrest family and community. And so that goes beyond the 4 walls of Timbercrest. Also with stakeholders, we've met with transportation, like Ms. Miles said. We've met with Schoolway Cafe and said, this is our vision. We know that you have some concerns. Let's problem solve and work through these together. And so by empowering those different areas, you're going to naturally get more buy-in. With our teachers, initially, and this is something that I'm really proud of, as far as even more than the data. When we initially started PBIS, we had a team of about 7 or 8. Every year I put out an intention survey, what do you plan on doing next year? Any leadership roles? And within reason, I pretty much let everybody who wants to be a part of our PBIS team and committee join. Now, I would not recommend that right away, but we've set some clear expectations and we worked through that process for many years. But at this point, we're looking at more than a quarter of our staff that wants to be part of our PBIS leadership team. So this year alone, we had 25 teachers asked to be part of the PBIS leadership team. And so what that tells me is, they have buy-in. They think it works, and the data shows it works. But it all goes back to, are we empowering them to give them the opportunity to get natural buy-in? So we run it through our PBIS leadership committee, but any teacher at any point knows they can step into my office, they can step into Miss Miles' office, they can step into Miss Bryant's office and say, hey, this is an idea that we have. This is an idea that we think would be great, would work. Our response is, you know what, I think that's great. Let's bring it up at the PBIS leadership team and we'll see where it goes. And not all those ideas come to fruition, but it's just the idea that every stakeholder, whether it be parent, whether it be Schoolway Cafe, whether it be teacher, whether it be a paraprofessional, whatever the case may be, feels like they have a voice within the process, which gets you that natural buy-in. And the third thing, I just am really, and Mandy kind of laughs every time I say this, I'm really, I guess passionate's the best word to use, is that PBIS is king. So several schools will come visit and say, listen, we have PBIS, which we're implementing. It's maybe not at the point where it's at Timbercrest, but we also have this thing called the house system, and we're implementing that too. And right there, the conversation stops and they say, okay, we've got to reevaluate. PBIS is the overarching umbrella. House system is awesome, right? Parents love it. They love the glitz, glamour. Students love the parties. They love, all the activities come from it. But as soon as you take the house system, and I know this is very specific just because the house system is probably the most popular, and separate that or move it from under PBIS, it's a recipe for disaster. The way that we look at it is PBIS is king. It's up here. And then we have support such as positive referrals. We have support such as the house system. We have our tier 2, tier 3 supports for specific heavy hitters. And so I just want you to be careful when you're pitching this. And I'm obviously there's some administrators on here, but there might be some people who have gotten the responsibility of, hey, we want you to launch PBIS for our school, and you might be a teacher on assignment, or you might be a school counselor, whatever the case might be. Make sure when you pitch that to whoever you're pitching it, whether it's your staff or whether it's your principal who's asked you to do this initiative, that PBIS is the big umbrella and the house system is a support under it. Maybe you have, Tiger Bucks is a support. Maybe you have, positive referrals. But as soon as you take one of those supports and put it up with PBIS, it doesn't work. It's got to be a start at the top with PBIS, which again has to start with your leadership, and then it moves down. And just to piggyback off of that, and one more last statement I would make is, in order for PBIS to be effective, it does start with the top, okay? And I will give any of you my personal cell phone if you have a principal that's resistant, or you have a principal that says, well, we'll see how, we can, we'll try it. We'll see how it goes. I would love to talk to that principal and tell them the value and the power of it, but it does have to start at the top, because the principal sets the tone, and then getting buy-in with the assistant principal, your teacher on assignment, any deans, anything like that, that would be the next layer. But if the principal is not all in, it's not going to be as effective as it can be. And I would promise you, I love to share our discipline data. to prove that it works when administration makes it a top priority. So that's all I have. And again, I appreciate Miss Miles. She's amazing. She's a rock star. We couldn't do it without her. Miss Bryan, I don't know if she's still on it. She's awesome. And also big kudos to Mandy and the team, because we appreciate these opportunities to help build capacity with PBIS, because we really, really believe in it, and we know it works, and we have the data to prove it.
And Lonnie, if I could just piggyback on something that you said when you were talking about integrating the house system too, is that one of the challenges that I've had with other schools, and I want to throw this out as a caution, is that schools will, without setting that foundational piece with your expectations and what that looks like, they will jump to a reinforcement system. And so that's when we see things fall apart, because we're not setting that foundation. So just, you guys have made my life easy. So I just wanted to throw that little piece in there, just to be cautious that, you know, we've got to be very intentional. And if you wouldn't mind, before you jump off, would you drop your email address into the chat?
Yeah, I will. And one other thing too, Mandy, and I did kind of jump on late. That kind of goes back to what you're saying. I'm going to kind of weave it in here. When Timbercrest first started, we had a 3-year goal, which is part of the PBIS planning portion, right? And so year 1 was truly establishing your expectations, and that was based on data and high traffic areas, which led us into, you know, what are going to be, we've got our big expectations, but then what are we going to have as far as to support those expectations? And the reality is, after year 1, we had a firm team, leadership team. We had a firm set of expectations. We had our problematic areas identified. We started getting some buy-in and some support from Schoolway Cafe and transportation, because those were some of our heavy hitting areas. And that was about it. Like, we were okay with just being there year 1. And so understand too that and I'm not saying this in a boastful manner or prideful or anything like that, but what Timbercrest is doing now is not what it did year 1. And if you're just rolling this out, you shouldn't expect that same thing. It typically takes time, but you have to do it slow and you have to do it well, because as soon as you try and rush and get to the glam and the glitz and the awards and the house system and the supports and all that, if you haven't set those expectations and you don't have that strong leadership team and that strong buy-in, you're wasting your time. But yes, I will do that. I'll drop that for sure.
And can I just add on to that as well? Sorry. I know it mentions in this slide about adjust as needed, alignment of expectations with classroom rules and the PBIS at home challenges. And so those are things that we did do here at Timbercrest. But again, those were not year 1. Those were slowly rolled out. As Mr. Timmarsh mentioned, we've had our PBIS team that has gotten bigger and bigger each year. And every year we look at the benchmarks of quality that I know was going on in the chat, but we look at that and see what areas that we could improve in. And then as a team of about the 20 teachers, we discuss things that we can do differently or how to enhance. So when I first came on board here, this is my 6th year here at Timbercrest, but when I first came, we had what was called PAWS, and it was just slightly similar to our PBIS expectations, but every classroom teacher had their own rules that they would make up, sit quietly, raise your hand, etc. So over the years, we then integrated and blended them together. So every teacher has be safe, be responsible, be respectful. That is our overarching expectations for the campus. But then they talk with their students and ask, what does it look like to be safe in our classroom? What does it look like to be responsible and respectful in our classroom? So as I mentioned, we did that for the bus and the cafeteria, but each teacher has done it as well for their particular classroom setting. And again, that did not happen year 1, year 2, or year 3. It took probably our 4th year before they did that. And then the PBIS at home challenges, we actually just started integrating that last year. And that was, again, looking at benchmarks of quality. What can we do to get the parent buy-in? And so these were the little activities that we had the students take home as homework, and where the parents had to actually assist the students with something, and then they signed off, brought it back, and we did a drawing for prizes, awards, and things like that. But again, that did not happen year one. So that slow integration and adjusting as needed throughout the years is where you're going to get the buy-in, and let the teachers give you their input. And I think that is a lot on my mind that helped us be successful. That's it.
And I may be wrong in saying this, but didn't you have one of your students report that he had to call his dad out for not following the expectations at home?
Yes. And actually, one of our at-home challenges was how can you be safe, responsible, and respectful at home? But then also, how can you be safe, responsible, respectful in the community? And so that was something too the kids were talking about, like when they went to Target, somebody wasn't being safe and things like that. So they're using it all over the place.
That is awesome. So Dr. Abshir, are we ready to open up for Q&A?
Let's do it. So I'm not sure if anybody, I just checked in the chat and I didn't see any specific questions. And I don't know if that is because you guys have just shared so much, people are taking it all in and don't have questions, or you've been so engaging and folks are instead on your website seeing if you have any openings to come to work with you. I always joke and say, I want to work at Timbercrest and follow you and your team wherever you go. So our youngest goes away to college next year. Maybe we'll just retire and come have a second career at Timbercrest.
There you go.
We'll volunteer because I'm sure there's no openings. So any questions from participants on specific, examples, or anybody want more details on any particular thing that you heard?
Is that this? You want that? No.
So just for clarity, I think that I heard you say, but just please clarify. You started with the tiger paws, but now you use the house points instead of, or in addition to?
That's a great question. Go ahead.
You got
I
it,
can
Mr.
answer that.
Titmarsh, or
Okay. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we use the pause prior to really implementing the house system. Again, the house system I wasn't even interested in. No offense if you love the house system. I was not really interested in until, year 3, year 4, until I felt like we had a good foothold on PBIS. And at this point, we implement the house system about year 3, year 4. Got a lot of great buy-in. Christy Kuches and the admin team did an awesome job of rolling that out. But it felt like it was a little disconnected. And so at that point, we took away the PAW points and replaced them with the house system points. So it is not an addition. It is now our house system is kind of the school-wide tier 1 reinforcer. Now, with that being said, if you go to any of our students and say, hey, tell me about, your house system, probably they're going to correct you and say, oh, you mean our PBIS, because again, we see it as a support under PBIS. Most of our dialogue from students, parents, is the word PBIS rather than house system. And I know I keep harping on this, but it's, to me, a very, very important distinction that you have to make clear from jump.
I absolutely love that and appreciate that. And asking for another school that I may be working with, are students then able to earn anything individually, or it's all towards the house system?
So I can take that too. No, they are able to. We have a positive referral system in place as well. And that's something that gets typically more individualized. Praise, reward, whatever you want to use. I will tell you that there's been a lot of conversation over the last couple of years at our PBIS meetings on, hey, we've got a lot of supports put into place For maybe our tier 2, tier 3 students, are we overlooking some of our role models and our leaders? And we have taken proactive approaches to recognizing, individual student efforts of positive following PBIS expectations. Now, if you follow our social media, or I got on kind of late, so I don't know if this was mentioned, but I am a little extra, and I do go a little. I don't know the right word, but we've done things where we give out house colored vans. So like for Team Haramu, who is red, we've given out red vans for students following PBIS or completing a challenge or things like that. So there is individual recognition, but that's an area that I think that we need to kind of continually improve on. And remember, the house points the actual individual students can earn, and we make a big deal about that. So it kind of empowers the students where they're feeling like they're getting individual recognition for doing something right by just earning a house point for their team while working for that house party.
Thank
And
you.
then can I add two things? Some teachers still do an individual reward in their own classrooms. So if students earn so many house points themselves, they have rewards, like stickers or lunch bunch or something like that. But we also have implemented Student of the Week or Tiger of the Week. And so the teachers can nominate a student who is showing above and beyond different characteristics. And again, this is through our PBIS system. And then that is weekly. It could be for kindness, helping, and things, different attributes that they may have. And then those students get a certificate and then a coupon for something somewhere every week for those students. And so that way we're showing individual recognition as well as teachers have recognized someone individually in the classroom who's going above and beyond with those PBIS expectations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Dama. If I could interrupt, I'm going to read. There's 2 questions in the chat, and one is, we have a system that has been in place for many years, very similar to Timbercrest. My biggest questions are, how do you motivate for continued staff buy-in? How do you get new staff to the school to buy in? If anybody wants to address that one.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I think that, and I'd love to know maybe a little bit more information about your staff. Do you have a huge rollover? Are you a pretty stable staff with veteran teachers and maybe only 1 or 2 new staff members? Because I do think it's kind of a different approach. Timbercrest, we have very little turnover, and we're one of the few schools, if not the only school, that we don't have vacancies, which I attribute to PBIS, a lot of it to PBIS, because we just don't have the behavior issues. But again, I think it starts from the top up. I think that it starts with the leadership, with your principals setting that as a priority. One of the things that we were kind of laughing about is, we know that testing season is a big season for everybody, and we've got all hands on deck. Well, at Timbercrest, PBIS doesn't stop at testing season. If anything, it becomes more even focused on more, because we're following the expectations and we're going to put our best foot forward as far as testing going. So it really has to come from the top up as making that always a priority. Mandy, earmuff this if you need to. But even with my bosses, when we talk about data and we talk about, ELA proficiency and learning gains, to me, PBIS is still at the top. Because if you don't have those behaviors in place, and you're constantly removing kids, or you got constant referrals, and how are you going to grow as a school in the academic piece? And so again, when I prioritize thing, top of my list is PBIS. That's what anybody who's ever reached out to me, as far as talk about this, PBIS has to start at the top. So I think that's a big thing. And I think if you frame your action steps around PBIS being the #1 priority for your principal, then I think that goes a long way with getting the staff buy-in. We use common language. We recognize staff at this point probably just as much as we do students. I know they talked about the Tiger Strike, but the first time we went in to a teacher's classroom and said, listen, you've been doing PBIS every single day. We appreciate that. I'm taking your class. Go for a 15-minute break. Go for a 30-minute break. And they're like, what? And they're like, no, it's okay. No. I'm not giving you an option. Go on a break. Go, have a cup of coffee. Go, do a Sudoku or whatever that thing's called. Whatever it might be, you'd earn this. We can't provide more money, but recognition for teachers and staff goes so far. So I would say that, again, but that all comes back to, hey, PBIS is going to be our top priority. And then as far as with new staff coming in, we bring our new staff in during the summer. We have a little pre-planning opportunity, and from day one, they know that this is going to be a top priority. In fact, when we interview staff members, one of my first questions is, what do you know about PBIS? And tell me, what you know about PBIS at Timbercrest. Now, I have the luxury that we don't have a lot of turnover, that I can be very selective on who I hire. But my expectation would be that they know a little bit about PBIS, and that, they've done their research and looked up Timbercrest a little bit. And if you look up Timbercrest, I can promise you'll see PBIS plastered all over the place. And so we set that expectation from the interview process that PBIS is a top priority here at Timbercrest.
All right, there are a couple more. I know we're about to be out of time. I don't know if you have any advice for a frustrated team. I work with some schools where there's an established PBS team, but the school principal is not fully on board. This lukewarm attitude towards PBIS is obvious to staff, and it shows with spotty buy-in from staff. They're frustrated. Any advice?
Yep, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's a concern. And my advice, if all I can control is what I can control, and I know what's important to me. But anytime that I've met with administrators about this, whether it be a principal, whether it be Mandy at the district level, whether it be our superintendent who's asked me about it, you have to have a principal that is all in, because that principal, he or she, sets the tone for the entire school. To me, what bought me all in was the data and what Timbercrest has done, the extra layers and the more that they've put into PBIS. And so I would love to share that. If you want to, email me, I can send you, a 3-year look at our discipline data. And to me, it speaks for itself. Or I could even actually start from 2015, 16, 17, 18, and it would speak for himself. But that's all I know to tell you to do.
Thank you for that. In case you missed the email address in the chat, I put it in there again, just so you don't have to scroll back through, because I know we're really close to being out of time. I think Betsy probably has some poll questions for us. And of course, reach out if you have additional questions. And I can also get in touch with our folks in Volusia. Thank you so much, Dr. Elzie, Volusia County Schools, Mr. Tidmarsh, Ms. Miles, Ms. Bryant, and thank you participants for hopping on and listening to what we have to share from Volusia.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
so
you all.
much. that was such a great training. So many nuggets of wisdom. There were so many times where I just wanted to write down what you were saying so I could quote it later. There is a survey on your screen right now. This is to help us gain information for making our trainings as good as they can be. So if you wouldn't mind just answering the couple of questions that you should see on your screen right now, that would be amazing. And are you guys seeing that chat survey on the
Yes.
screen? Okay, good. Just want to make sure. We are a grant-funded project, so we do like to collect data to help us continue to exist. So we really appreciate your feedback. And thank you again. And we will be posting this chat on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So if you know somebody that would like to see it, you can give them the link to that chat. It should be up by tomorrow. Yes, and thank you for joining us from outside of Florida. Our chats are open to anybody who would like to sit and listen.
And I did not scroll to this final slide when we were going through questions. It's another picture of the model school recognition, but also of the team presented at the international conference on APBS. Fortunately, it was in state in Jacksonville, so I didn't have to travel far, but it was really cool to get to highlight them and let folks from really all over the world pick their brains and hear from them and learn some of those nuggets, such as my favorite today is PBIS is king. I feel like that should be our slogan. But I mean, all jokes aside, I think that was a really nice way of framing the work. Like, I think that's huge for staff buy-in. We're not throwing a bunch of different things. We're consistent. I mean, at Timbercrest, they're steady. That's the framework. And if it doesn't fit within that PBIS framework as king, then it's not going to really jive with the vision and mission of the school. And that to me helps with consistency and buy-in. Like, we understand the vision and everything kind of fits within that. And if it doesn't, we're not going to overwhelm staff with all these extra things.
Okay,
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. And if you could just fill out the poll before you leave, that would be amazing. I will stick around for just another minute or two. Thanks, everybody.